5 years ago, Tony Edwards, right there, proposed a talk for HalfStack London, and it was live rapping detection. I think he said beat, rhymes, and unit tests, and the unit test was probably a bit of a stretch, but it sounded good. It sounded technical to do that, and really, it was like a really awesome audience engagement session. Mine isn't nearly as engaging, but I'll try. And Tony basically, are you an amateur rapper or just a semi-pro rapper or just for fun? I don't know.
Let's stick with amateur.
Amateur, okay. Amateur rapper. And what he did is he took a bunch of sounds and tested the speech-to-text technology at the time. And it did really good until he actually tried to rap. And then basically it would start to fall apart and eventually give up and crap out. And so I thought, well, I've been kind of exploring this area lately, so I'd sort of see what's changed in 5 years. So that's kind of the premise of the talk. And of course, with AI, because that's the theme of the day. So I think as we just observed, audio is really just data. It's just another form of data. And we can, it can be clean data or it can be messy data. There can be data to extract from other data. And that's why AI might be pretty good at it, because it's pretty good at handling that sort of thing. Oh, I just stole my punchline. Yep. So, in my experience, probably the most useful thing I've found for AI is actually taking data in some format or extracting it from some format and putting it into something else. And that's not the only useful case for it, but that's where I found that it really thrives. So, a couple terms for speech to text. What we want to achieve is automatic speech recognition, or ASR, not to be confused with ASMR, which I'm often accused of being. And we want to minimize, and I did it in the American spelling, sorry everyone, the word error rate, so the WER. It's basically if you're about 5% or better, it's generally considered pretty good as a WER in current state of things. So there's a long, funny history of the attempt to do things like closed captioning. Closed captioning, the joke is that it was used to hide data stream inside of video. But also, pre-AI, what did we do? We had manual transcriptions, live note takers, closed captioning systems. And the spec for closed captioning is just hysterically bad and complicated and convoluted. Has anyone ever looked at this before? Like how to write captioning? Chris, so yeah, you were DJ, yep. And a few other people, yeah. So I'm glad I didn't have to think about this stuff, which is nice. But it feels kind of crazy still. So what are some of the goals? Why would you want speech to text, right? So accessibility is kind of the obvious one, to generate subtitles or to generate translations into other languages so people can understand what's being said. But also sometimes it's a lot faster to read than to listen, or to speak than to write. So I don't know about you, but I get a lot of good ideas late at night, and I really don't feel like opening up my computer or typing into my phone. So I've gotten used to saying, hey, Kit, do this for me, right? Not Siri, I said Kit. And it's nice to, like, how many of you have Apple Watches or a smartwatch? How many of you have talked to your watch to get it to take down a note for you for later? A lot of you. So 5 years ago, I would have never thought that would be useful because it didn't recognize my voice. It would just insert a bunch of random words. But it's gotten really, really good. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Also, I think storing data in audio clips is not particularly convenient, especially if you want to sort of redo the information later. So say you're creating a message about your company and you want to like clean it up. Well, pretty much it means like re-recording the audio clip instead of just like changing some text or doing a diff. So it's nice, I think, to store information in text format rather than in audio format. So that was the man. We all had hats on backwards. It was 8 Mile style. And I mean, you can see some of the words that got confused on, some of them it commented out, but it was really falling apart, and then eventually it just crashed. So it was cool, it was promising, and it was not ready. So, and then the software failed miserably, yeah. So it's just a few considerations to take into account if you want to do speech to text. No big deal. I've been spending my past couple of months working on this. So like the language of choice, licensing, the quality of the transcription, ease of use, whether you host it yourself or do it as a service, whether you do it on device or via a server, what the performance is, what the cost is, limitations, file format, subtitles, different voices, known as diarization voice commands, and On-device, offline versus cloud, which I guess is sort of like service versus self-hosted, but not completely, because sometimes you want to be able to do it like in a browser, or versus on like a desktop device versus on your own server versus the third-party cloud service. And the cool thing is there's options that work for all of these now. And it's almost not exciting to say that like it just kind of works regardless of which choice you make today. But there are nuances and details that I think come into play. So it's almost like JavaScript frameworks. There's more frameworks than I could imagine ever having time to try out. I thought when I tried this out, when I proposed the talk, there'd be like 3 or 4 options, and there's dozens and dozens. And some of them build on top of each other. And I quickly tried all of them with a couple of audio clips, and they all did really, really well. So like, well, that's not very exciting. So what should I do? And then I discovered the web speech API. Has anyone tried that before? Web speech API? A few people? Okay. So it's a browser API. It's kind of strange, but it works, sort of. It does not work in Firefox. And it can either basically it uses whatever that browser has available to it as a speech engine. So if you use Safari on a Mac or on an iPhone, it uses Siri's voice to text. If you use it in Chrome or something similar, it uses Google's service. So it actually goes to a server and does the transcription there. So we start with the default, right? Well, it's built into the browser. What could go wrong? Well, it doesn't work in Firefox, so that kind of strikes it out for me, but we explored anyway. So the API has 3 key pieces. There's the speech recognition API, which is the thing that recognizes that you're talking and does something with it. Grammar translator, which basically takes the text as data and applies grammar rules to it to try to figure out what words it is or what it's matching or how to do that. That's where you, when you get into like the world of AI, that's where you apply your language models and start to do some really interesting things. It uses JSGF, which is not JavaScript grammar format, but it's Java something grammar format. I'm not remembering what the acronym is, but it's actually a Java grammar. And then speech synthesis, which is the reverse. So if you want to go from text to speech. So if you want to have someone read to you. This is used by Google Docs in Chrome and Safari. So if you've used Google Docs recently and you see there's a little microphone button and you push it, this is what it's doing, but it does not show a microphone at all in Firefox. Let's see. Yes. So officially, it's partially supported in non-Firefox browsers. It's not well supported. And oddly enough, this is one thing where because Chrome depends on Google's service by default for this, it's actually one of the few areas that's quite different between Chrome and Edge and Brave and other Chrome-based browsers. So it's not something that all Chrome-based browsers do the same way. Let's see. I really like effects. My goal over the course of a day is to use every keynote transition possible. So I think I said all this. The results are pretty good. Like they're fine. I wouldn't say they're great. It defaults to your default language settings that you have set in your browser. So if you want to speak a different language, you have to basically tell it to switch languages. There's UIs to do that. The Google DevTools has an example for that, and so on. So what about I just shove one of these other APIs into the browser with WASM? And I did that, and it works, but it's really slow. It takes about 5 to 10 seconds per second of audio to transcribe it, which is, unless the audio is like 2 seconds, it's considerably slower than just sending it to a service and getting a callback or using web speech. Also, you can't really, like, I think Whisper AI has 500,000 minutes or maybe more of audio training for it. And so you're not going to shove 500,000 minutes of a language model into the browser and have that work anytime soon. So ChatGPT, OpenAI, everyone's heard of those. So I used to give these framework talks, and like, so people were like, what's the best JavaScript framework? So I'd give a talk and be like, here's how to choose a JavaScript framework. And I'd like talk through like the nuances of 20 frameworks, and people would be like, yeah, but I'm using Angular or React, so which one should I use? And I'm like, but like, it depends what you're doing. You have all these nuances and all these effects, and the reality is like people generally like try to pick something that's going to be widely supported and widely adopted. So the natural place to look is OpenAI, and what's cool is their Whisper model, or their Whisper API is open source, so you don't have to use their service. it turns out I can't find a way to run it cheaper than they charge, which is kind of frustrating. So like, it actually costs more to run it on like my own local server or my own local machine in terms of energy costs than it does to make an API call to them and get it back. So and there are other cloud providers that are optimized to run language models on them as well, and I tested those, and those were also a little bit more expensive. So it was like I couldn't beat it on price in terms of computational costs. So it was kind of interesting to see that. But I mean, it's 0.006 cents a minute, so it's like 4 cents. What is that? 4 cents an hour? I don't know. Someone said like a couple dollars for it. You could record your whole day 24/7 for like under $10 or something like that, and transcribe every word that was said in your presence or that you said, which is kind of creepy but kind of cool. So yeah, it's like Truman Show in real life, right? So, the way the chat GPT, or sorry, the OpenAI API works is basically you upload files, and you can upload audio or video files. There's basically 7 or 8 different formats that are supported, but it has a limit of 25 megabytes, which is really easy to break if you do video, but it's perfectly fine for long audio clips. What you should do is like chunk it so that you can sort of like send it concrete blocks of data over time rather than just sending it weird 25 megabyte blocks. And you get the results back like way faster than the file takes to play, like orally. So like a 60-second clip comes back in about 6 to 12 seconds at most, sometimes faster. And in every language I've tested in like 20 different languages in different speeds, it auto-detected language correctly and got a 5% or better error detection rate, which I thought was pretty astonishing. So that's like part of it, is you can go from a file, or you can implement a microphone and the microphone button. You can either use the Web Speech API, but then you have to go through the Web Speech API, or you can use a media recorder, which sets a stream and sets blobs and buffers, and you can specify decibel levels, and you can detect whether or not you're in a mode of silence or not. So the idea is basically if you have a couple seconds of silence, you chunk the data you've just recorded off to the server or off to the service and get results back iteratively. But you don't want to like send something like mid-sentence, because it might get confused on what you meant, and it might try to fill in words if the sentence isn't complete. And so you're trying to like do this weird optimization of like sending data, not sending white space data, sending data in blocks that are big enough to get interesting results back, but not so big that they take forever. And that's kind of how it works. So it's like this 50 little things to make one little thing work well. So I thought it would be fun to start with the file version, and I have 5 clips, just me talking as a test, and then 4 JavaScript people who are also musicians, and to sort of see how well it does at transcribing them. So we'll do that. So I used Living Spec, since I actually wanted to get this feature into my own product. So there was like, this is called conference-driven development. So I had to ship this feature in time for the conference. So the file version is pretty simple. So this first version, I think, is just me saying like this is a test or something, but let's see what it says. Oh, I'm gonna need the HDMI audio, please, or the. Creating a test audio for OpenAI. Can you? That's just from my computer. That's not going through your. Oh, I'm not plugged in. That's fine. That always helps. Where is the? There we go. If only there was someone who would help people set up their talks. Yeah. Creating a test audio for OpenAI. Okay, so like most simple thing, right? So I can transcribe that clip that I've uploaded, assuming I'm connected to the network. Creating a test audio for OpenAI. Brilliant. Did it perfectly right. Now, Mina, or Abigail, sent me a little clip of a new song they're working on. And whose breath gives life to all the world. Hear me. Now, what I like about that clip is it's kind of got a lot of background noise and it's not perfect, so it should do worse, right? But we'll go ahead and transcribe it. And it's exactly what was said. And even though some of the words were really long and stretched out, and some of them were really short and fast, it did not matter. It got the words correctly. Cool. That's great. Paul Campbell, he runs Tito. It's a longer clip, so I'm just going to jump somewhere in the middle. It's about like a douchey startup founder or something. So this is kind of folksy. Guitar is kind of loud relative to the vocals. You'd think it would struggle a bit, right? So we'll go ahead and try and transcribe that. And I'm not showing much code because the code actually isn't the interesting part of this. The interesting part is like you connect these 50 things together and you get exactly the words he's saying in the song. And the song's 3.5 minutes, and that was what, maybe 10 seconds that it took to transcribe it, which is just insane. And that includes network round trip and everything. So everyone knows Dylan Beatty probably. He's like the Weird Al of JavaScript.
Handlebars, hibernate, solar, activate, Falcon, Flask, and Silver Stripe, and Typo 3 flow. Agave, Pixie, Hazar, MVC, Code Ignite to Lithium, and PR Radio. Raphael, Bobo, Bottle, and Tornado, Django, Cherry Pie, and W.
So that's we're going to build a framework, but also known as We Didn't Start the Fire. But he names like every random JavaScript framework ever done. So see how well it does, because there's a lot of proper nouns. I haven't actually tested this one. That did perfectly. Wow, crazy. Well, maybe W. No, W turn, yeah. Okay. Crazy. All right, so I'm really struggling to stump the system, which is good. Now, Tony Edwards. This is his Monster remix, performing live with Kanye, Jay-Z, and Nicki Minaj. I'll just cut a little bit.
Now every building I see, I think needs a renovation, so I bring it to the ground with the King Kong pound. Watch the people bounce around like a ping pong round. Suspected I'm dyslexic, but I'm still gonna haunt ya. Told you fuck.
Now I have no idea what Tony is saying whatsoever here, or anyone really. I have no clue. It's great. I heard the F word though. To cover your ears, Otto. Yep. When Otto was 2, he turns to my dad. We're like driving to the airport, and he's like, "Fucking dog shit." He's quoting my wife, and my dad's like, "What?" And he's like, "Fucking dog piss." And it was, my wife was not happy with our dog lately, so it was great. So he learned humor at a young age. So that's great. So let's see how it did with Tony. And last I checked, it did quite well. But we'll see how it did. It's a little bit longer. And you look at it, and Tony, I couldn't do better than this did. And I don't know if it got it exactly right, but if it didn't, it's damn close. Yeah, very close. So now, the real test, if Tony wants to come up here. Can we entice Tony to come up here on stage? Woo! I bought this really fun-looking retro mic. It's untested. I've never used it before. Best way to do conference talks. And I'm going to press the microphone button on here when you're ready. And I just want you to spend like 15 to 30 seconds to try to confuse the tool. I'm going to go and just delete this stuff out of here so it's not in the way. I mean, it doesn't matter, but might as well. So whenever you're ready, I'm going to push the microphone button. Okay. Go ahead and talk into it and speak into it or whatever you want to do.
Quit searching this instant and turn your attention to witness a person with perfect rhythm, spinning, surging, picture serpents, twisting, merging, kissing, squirming, witness, a surgeon in terms of precision. The work I deliver is surely efficient. You've never heard of a wordsmith on earth living as proficient as this, deserving a position with the industry. Mention me, TE, I'm coming from the sunny Cornwall streets.
And now we'll see how it did. Look at that. How did it do, Tony?
Incredibly good. It's better than if I'd have typed it out.
Right, exactly. So AI has won speech to text, in my opinion. So that's pretty cool. Thanks, Tony. It's awesome.
You should try
Should try what? Oh, yeah. Lucy, come on down. She has this tongue twister. It's an Australian tongue twister. I'm just to be safe. Give me a second. I'll tell you when it's ready.
I was testing Otto's tongue twister skills last night, and I've been.
Yeah. Okay. You ready?
Okay, ready? Betty Botter bought a bit of butter, but she said this butter's bitter. If I put it in my batter, it will make my batter bitter. But a little bit of better butter will make my bitter batter better. So Betty Botter bought a bit of better butter to make her bitter batter better. Will it read it? That was the slowest I've ever done it.
I think it did pretty good.
Betty Botter bought a bit of it. Yeah.
Now I know what you were saying last night. Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, so we've lost, so that's good. Human 0, AI 1. All right, so that's the newest feature in Living Spec. I like masks, as you know. I like to predict the future and organize this fun event, and I also maintain Slate and Plate, which are rich text editing frameworks. And that's my talk. Thank you. Any questions? Yes. Whoa. I just used its default, and it was that good, so I didn't really see much of a point in trying anything else. The deep speech one from Mozilla doesn't use a model, and surprisingly, it did almost as well, which was really surprising to me. Yeah. Sorry, I can barely hear you because the AC came on.
How well does it deal with regional accents?
Regional accents, I mean, I think we just heard like 3 very different accents, and it did quite well. Now, how well it would do with like Gaelic, I'm not sure, but it says like, well, the funny thing is when I read the documentation, it says it works in English. And so, of course, my co-founder is Serbian and talked to it in Serbian, and it worked fine. So then we just started trying a whole bunch of other languages, and it worked. So we're really not sure what the support is for it, to be fair. Otto, you were next.
Was it harder to code than other tools are?
So I'm kind of an angry developer sometimes, and so it's sort of like the details are often the hardest part. Like you have to you spend a lot of time researching and figuring it out, and then you're stuck on like 2 things that are broken for a while, and then things mostly work, and then you're trying to figure out like all the little optimizations, like how long to wait before sending the data off after. Like I was like, Tony, just breathe for a second so we can get the partial result back, but I'm not going to send the data until you pause for a couple seconds, because otherwise I'm sending a lot of extra requests and so on. So yeah. Yes.
Thinking about that 25 meg limit to just request, does like the bit rate of the file we're sending matter? Can it be really low res?
So a couple of the examples I used were really low res, and a couple were pretty high res. It didn't seem to matter all that much. Yeah. I know there were more hands than that, so.
I was just wondering, when you played with like the Serbian, did you try starting in one language, then changing language halfway through the sentence?
So if you use the auto detection, it's not translating, it's just transcribing, but it was like mid-sentence, it was happy to switch languages with me. But they also have a translation service as well that's pretty good. Which I didn't implement yet, but you can translate between languages quite easily. So what I want to do next is, that's a cool first implementation, but now what I want to do is I want to add voice commands. And I want to track who's saying what, so that you can have like a log of who was talking during, say, a Zoom call or whatever, if you wanted that. But then what I want to be able to do is say, hey, Living Spec, switch to this page and add this here, and then switch to this page and do this, and open a task to do this. And that's where I think it'll kind of get more interesting, if I can come up with good ways to trigger actionable things based on the words. And I think it's probably pretty easy. It's just whenever you tokenize something like that, you risk over-tokenizing. Like when someone generically says the word task, suddenly you got a task, but they're just talking about how they're tired of the task of taking out the trash. They don't want you to actually open a task to take out the trash. Kind of like the Siri, opening while I was talking. So, Yeah. Yeah.
So, Dylan, I heard you had some costs for some of the models, but then there's also the one that runs in browser. Is that the browser one free?
The in-browser is free because Chrome gives it to you for free, and Safari, it's just built into your device. That was OpenAI, which was like the 6 cents a second, so like, you know, a few cents a minute. So I probably just spent like 10 cents to do the demo today, or maybe 20 cents. It is, but like energetically, it was cheaper than running it on this device with the model running locally from like a power consumption perspective too. So.
Are you going to stick with the OpenAI one, or will you move to the browser one?
I think we will probably, the speed of the browser one is faster, but there are ways to sort of, to stream the data as you go to make it feel just as fast as the browser one, because the Chrome one is still hitting a service. It's just they're cheating because they're using like built-in network connections and stuff to optimize it. Firefox doesn't support it, so at a minimum we can't do it there today. Yeah. Yeah. Is OpenAI retaining all of our audio? I haven't thought through the consequences of that yet, to be fair. But I think everyone's retaining everyone's audio at this point, so I don't know. It actually was, like I don't know if I should say this on the record. I'll say something to you after the break, or anyone who's interested, but it's kind of funny. No, well, like one. All right, so our VC is a super cool guy. He's like incredibly patient with, like our lead VC is an incredibly patient guy with our product. But he was joking. He was like, you know, your business model should actually be, people should have to pay to turn off the AI, and so like keep your data private. And I'm like, no, we're not going to go there. But that's cute, you know. So anyway, sorry, I couldn't hear that. Probably, yeah. Hey, Alexa. Yeah. Cool. All right, well, thanks, everyone.